I'm also the chair of the DC chapter of the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club has long been part of the fight to protect and expand our tree canopy in DC, and we were one of the primary groups behind the Urban Forest Preservation Act of 2002. The Sierra Club's top priority is fighting climate change, and we strongly support the Clean Energy DC Omnibus Act that you've introduced. Renewable energy is the key to combating climate change. But trees also play a vital role in mitigating climate change, sequestering millions of tons of carbon that would otherwise pollute our climate. According to the most recent National Climate Assessment from the Interagency U.S. Global Change Research Program, trees absorb and store the equivalent of 16% of all carbon dioxide emitted annually by fossil fuel burning in the United States. The Sustainable DC Plan calls for the district to, quote, plant and maintain 10,500 new trees per year in priority areas and to achieve a 40% tree canopy, unquote. The Urban Forestry Division of the DC Department of Transportation is almost there, planting 9,123 trees last year. DC has approximately 170,000 street trees. Our street trees move almost 7,000 metric tons of carbon pollution from the atmosphere every year. According to the EPA's greenhouse gas equivalencies calculator, the carbon taken out of the atmosphere from DC street trees is equivalent to the carbon emitted by burning 7.3 million pounds of coal, which is the dirtiest fossil fuel on the planet. To fight climate change, DC must continue to expand our efforts to ensure a healthy tree canopy in DC. Councilmember Che, you've long been a strong supporter of the environmental community on climate change, urban forestry, and other important issues. And we congratulate you on your recent re-election on November 6th. And because your re-election with 75% of the vote was actually the second most important experience for you that day, I also want to congratulate you on the birth of your first grandchild. Like most parents and grandparents, I'm sure you want your children and grandchildren to grow up in a safe, healthy community. You don't want them to endure the worst effects of climate change, catastrophic flooding, seemingly endless heat waves, and deadly sea level rise. And you want them to enjoy the benefits of trees, cleaner air, less stormwater runoff, more shade and energy savings, natural habitats for wildlife, and the psychic benefits trees provide, not just aesthetics, but also encouraging people to enjoy the outdoors and relieve stress. Your commitment, my commitment, and DC's commitment to our urban forest is the reason I'm here today to testify about deploying small cell technology in DC. DDOT's draft small cell design guidelines state that trees shall not be removed or have their critical root zones damaged for the installation of small cell infrastructure. It's a good thing that DDOT has thought about the effect that this small cell technology will have on the trees of DC. However, deeper consideration of the issue is needed. Specifically, the District of Columbia must ensure that street trees are not aggressively pruned as DC moves towards small cell infrastructure. This technology requires a direct line of sight between small cells. That could require chopping off large portions of tree branches, which could kill some of the district's largest and most majestic trees. These are trees that have been enjoyed by district residents and visitors for decades. The Sustainable DC Plan, in calling for more than 10,000 trees to be planted annually, notes that without proper maintenance, the trees won't flourish. Trees do not flourish with aggressive pruning. When they die, it takes decades to grow new trees the size of the large canopy trees that have been lost. That's not worth a slightly faster game of Angry Birds or a faster download of the latest Ariana Grande song. That's not to say expanding small cell technology isn't important. Like nearly everyone else in this room, I use my smartphone a lot, probably too much. I understand the need for faster data on wireless devices, but that should not come at a cost of damaging our tree canopy, which is just beginning to recover after decades of neglect. The Sierra Club requests that before the deployment of small cell technology, the district undertake a study of how this infrastructure will affect DC's trees. We ask that the DC government develop a plan to ensure maximum protection of our trees and our tree canopy, not just making sure trees aren't cut down and protecting the roots, but also protecting tree branches from heavy pruning. We cannot and should not try to prevent the advancement of 5G technology in the district, but we must ensure that our trees and our tree canopy are protected for future generations, for your granddaughter, for millions of others, and for the future of the climate.
My name is Pierre Guinord. I'm a DC resident, a Casey Trees volunteer, and we'll try to follow Mr. Celine's model for timeliness. My comments may echo a lot of what you've heard already today and what you may hear coming soon, but I think it'll still add a lot of detail to the background. Thank you for the opportunity to share my concerns about the impact the installation of 5G smart cell infrastructure may have on the city's precious but vulnerable tree canopy. The city needs to take every precaution available to ensure that the adoption of this exciting technology does not result in harm or setbacks to the health of the existing and invaluable tree canopy or to trees that may be planted in the future. In a CNBC interview in May of this year, Verizon CEO Lowell McAdam said that the need for a clear line of sight between access points was a myth about the millimeter wave spectrum, and that no such issue existed with the latest technology. However, the hardware installation guide for the Cisco access points that will be installed, according to the proposed notes on Octo's website, reminds technicians to avoid locating the devices in a location where there is an obstruction between the sending and receiving antennas, since physical obstructions such as, among other things, trees, can hinder performance of wireless devices. So although trees do not need to be out of the way entirely from the path of a wireless signal, they can potentially affect performance according to the access point manufacturer. In that light, it is not a stretch to imagine that newly installed access points that do not pose a threat to the city's tree canopy today could begin to put tree limbs or more at risk in the future. That threat already exists to trees improperly planted under utility lines. Those poor decisions sometimes lead not only to badly pruned trees, but could ultimately result in a tree getting removed, two consequences that cost money and time to make up for. And when we're talking about trees, time is no joke. An access point can be moved and work perfectly right away in its new location. A newly planted tree, or a tree healing from substantial pruning, constantly faces threats to its future as it redevelops roots or resists disease or decay. It is clear that the city needs to keep in mind that this new technology will keep evolving rapidly, and what seems to be necessary and unnegotiable today could easily be obsolete tomorrow. One thing that will not go obsolete is our need for trees and the endless and everlasting benefits we get from them, such as clean air, stormwater mitigation, and mental health. Therefore, I request that considerations for necessary or potential tree pruning be made both in the design guidelines and by the telecommunication companies performing site surveys, pre-installation of access points, and poles. Furthermore, there should be easy public accessibility of any documentation made in site surveys, as well as a map of all installed small cells around the city. Doing so will help mitigate any risk to DC's tree canopy arising from the installation of new poles, antennas, etc., because site choices can be independently assessed. If I may finish.
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. Taking the time to address a foreseeable issue now before it is a problem could save money and headaches in the future from having to prune, potentially endanger, or negatively impact our city's improving and famous tree canopy. After all, Washington, D.C. is the city of trees and not the city of 5G. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much.
I've been a D.C. resident, voter, and taxpaying citizen since 1971. I'm not an expert about trees or 5G cells, but I am concerned about our urban environment. I volunteer at the National Arboretum's Youth Garden and at Casey Trees as a tree planting team leader. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today about the installation of small cells in Washington. I appreciate that DDOT considered street trees in the proposed small cell design guidelines and committed to preventing the removal of existing trees. However, the likely need to heavily prune trees is troublesome. There are many beautiful tree-lined streets in my neighborhood and throughout the city. Pruning to provide sight lines would be unsightly. But more importantly, it would probably lead to the early demise of these trees at a time when we desperately need the many benefits trees provide. The installation of these cells will affect progress toward the city's 40% tree canopy goal. A healthy tree canopy helps ensure a healthy urban environment. In 1950, DC had a 50% tree canopy. For many years after I moved to DC, the tree canopy continuously diminished until the city and organizations like Casey Trees recognized the need to do something. They set a goal for a 40% tree canopy and are working hard to accomplish that goal and to educate people about the many benefits of trees in an urban setting. The city recently planted a sweet gum tree in front of my house. I watered it all summer and will water it again next summer. I want it to grow unhindered in order to provide its maximum potential as an object of beauty and an environmental asset. I'm here today to request that the city complete a full assessment of the potential impact these cells may have on DC street trees and trees located on adjacent private lots. This assessment needs to happen before the small cell guidelines are finalized. Actually, after listening to everything, more information on the specifics are needed at this point. And one thing that hit me with all of this is quality of life. This is a small picture, but this is outside my window. I love looking at the trees outside my window. It makes my life nice, wonderful. I went around my neighborhood.
Can I come over?
Yes,
It's really
you can.
good.
I'm not that far from here. I rode my bike here.
Okay.
I noticed on some of the trees, this is getting, I think it's in the thing I gave up there. There's a picture like this. This is one of the highest light poles we have around, but it's lower than the tree. So if we were to put something on that, the tree is not gonna, it's gonna block it. Lastly, my new tree. They planted it in front of my city. It's a sweet gum. It's beautiful, and I want it to grow.
Thank you.